Now, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM. AM 630. WMAL.
7:37 on the Morning Majority. It's time for the Redskins Report, presented by Fork Union Military Academy. Trevor Matich is here. Good morning.
In the house.
Good morning, Mary Catherine, and good morning, Major.
You know, with the boys gone, I'm endeavoring not to make this into a girl football interview. So when they had the ball and they didn't get it in the, what do you call that?
End zone.
The green monster.
I love me some football. So they could not put back-to-back wins together, sadly.
No,
the momentum, where did it go?
It went away.
Yeah.
It went away. You know what? I think it just might have gone up the chimney when Santa created a vortex, leaving, from all the early Christmas gifts he was.
That would explain a lot.
Yes.
The Santa vortex.
Well, and Shanahan sort of conceding, this rebuilding is taking a little longer than I thought it would.
That's reasonable, though. It's been a decade and a half getting to this point, really, of roster mismanagement, where they kept on bringing in other teams, aging free agents, overpaying them, and in doing so, giving up draft picks that could have led to younger players that they could have developed on their roster to become good players down the road. So they kept on fixing a problem on the surface with more surface solutions, and now they're finally going into the draft. Keep in mind that this last draft, they had 12 guys. 9 of those 12 guys have contributed in meaningful ways this year on the field in the regular season, and a 10th, Jarvis Jenkins, their second-round draft choice, was the best defensive lineman in camp before he got hurt. So we see them doing the things that need to be done the right way.
I wanted to ask you about that, Trevor, because I was looking at Mike Shanahan's comments after Saturday's loss, and I wanted to ask you, is this really credible? He says, I see a big difference from 2 years ago. We have a much younger football team. We have a lot more depth at a lot of different positions. I feel good about the football team and the direction we're headed. That's credible.
That is credible, because he's talking about direction. If he were to say that, I think we are a playoff caliber team now, but for a few bounces of the ball and a few lucky breaks, that would not be credible. But to talk about direction, that is, because right now the Redskins really are moving up. And when you talk about depth, that's one of the most important places. For example, on the offensive line, because of injuries, you've had guys that are rookies. Maurice Hurd at left guard, Willie Smith at left tackle, who's really held his own in the last 3 weeks against some of the better pass rushers in the NFL. You've seen guys that now are showing signs of encouragement that they can build from. And that's the kind of encouragement that they need to see, because you can't take an NFL team that has a depleted roster. Let's put it this way. It's extraordinarily rare to take an NFL team with a depleted roster and go from being a typical 5-6 win team and then turn it into a 10-11 win team in just a year or so. It takes time to fill out the roster because of the nature of how that's done with the draft and free agency. Then it takes time for young players to learn how to play in the NFL. And so right now the trajectory that they're on is positive.
So is it fair to say then, because it was always assumed that Shanahan is a systems guy and the system works, and there are those in Washington who now say, well, maybe the system doesn't work anymore, that Shanahan is not a systems coach anymore. 10 losses is still 10 losses in 2 years in a row. That can't be acceptable. Are you saying once he has the players, then the system takes over?
Yes, that is true. The thing about the system is that system is more about accountability and focus than it is about brilliance of X's and O's. It's players that win football games, but players need to be able to play fast in order to do that. And around here, you've had a new head coach about every 2 years or so. And even within head coaches that have stuck around for a little bit more than that, Joe Gibbs for 4 years, you've got changes in the offensive coordinator. So players are constantly learning new systems. Take a look at teams that are performing at the highest level. You've got New England, which has had the same basic offensive system for years. Green Bay, same basic offensive system for years. So the players don't have to think and then act. They can see and react, and that way you get the best out of your talent on the field. So to me, what they don't need is brilliant X's and O's. What Shanahan brings to the table in terms of X's and O's are fine. What they need is consistency, and we're seeing that starting to be built now with the Redskins for the first time in a long time.
Well, there has been a glimpse every now and then of this improved attitude that you've talked about being important, being able to bounce back. Any chance they can bounce back? This felt like a real popping the balloon.
Yeah, no,
you really felt like, we turned the corner with the Giants. This is really going to be big. And then, wah, wah, that's the sad trombone song.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Hey, you're a trombone player. You should bring it in and play
You're
it.
right. Meow. That's right. That's what we used to do. The thing is, the Vikings came in 2-12. They were on a 6-game losing streak. They hadn't had an interception in 9 games. And, of course, they get well on the Redskins with their backup quarterback and backup running back in the second half. So there's still a lot of problems and a lot of issues that need to be fixed. The advantage that you had, Mary Catherine, is that you got to go to vent in a way that was much better for the rest of us. See, we're all pent up with Redskins constipation in terms of the frustration that we have. But you got to go to Mount Kilimanjaro and stand on the very summit and scream to the heavens and let out your frustration. So you're way ahead of us right now.
I did, and it didn't do any good.
I know.
But actually, there was that one win when I came, because while I was gone, of course, I'm famous because if I'm not paying attention to your team, they will win.
They will do better. Right.
So I've posited that people should pay me not to pay attention to their teams.
What's the quarterback answer for the Redskins?
The quarterback answer, I believe, is Rex Grossman next year, probably as a starter. And if not a starter, then certainly the backup to mentor a young guy. Matt Barkley, USC's quarterback, deciding to stay in school hurts the Redskins' opportunity to get a top-shelf quarterback with their first pick, which will probably be in the top 7 or 8. Robert Griffin III of Baylor has not yet announced whether he's coming out, but I wouldn't be surprised if he stayed in college. That means that the only real top quarterback that you could say is a guy that rates that high of a grade would be the guy that'll probably go number 1, which is Stanford's Andrew Luck, which means that the Redskins, in my opinion, shouldn't reach for a quarterback there. If there's not a guy there that they don't love, they should either take a different position with that first pick or trade down because there is depth at quarterback. And ultimately, I'd like to see them have one of their mid-round picks be Boise State's Kellen Moore. They say he's too short, but he is incredibly productive, incredibly accurate, and in my opinion, has a chance, if he's able to overcome his shortness, to be a terrific quarterback in this system. And he's a guy that I would target mid-round.
What about receivers? Sometimes they look great in college, do not transition well to the NFL. Is it a risky to take a first-pick receiver? Is this what this team needs?
There's guys like Justin Blackmon of Oklahoma State that are out there that are really terrific talents, but I'd be leery about taking a receiver that high. My preference is to take a core player that high, which means offensive line, defensive line, or pass rusher, so linebacker, or cover corner. From a receiver standpoint, if it's not a guy like the Lions' Calvin Johnson, I want to take receivers farther down.
Last question, speaking of the Lions. I married into a Lions family. Is it a
Mary
sign of the
Catherine.
end times?
It just
They're in
goes
the
to
playoffs?
show how gracious and kind you are.
I know, right?
I think when the
At
Lions...
least she did not marry into a family of lions.
well,
Pride.
the Lions, yes, the sign of end times that the Lions made the playoff. I think the Mayans were actually, ancient Mayans, looking towards 2012 as the year that the Lions would make the playoffs as the end of times, and they only missed it by a single year.
there
That's
you
great
go.
accuracy.
As a Charger fan, I can tell you it is end of times for North Turner, though.
I'm sorry.
Thanks much,
So
Trevor
that'll be good
Matich.
for him to go.
Appreciate you being here.
Great thing.
Great